Hi friends, it's Destiny, and today I want to talk to you about my 10 favorite books of 2019. I'm going to apologize in advance if I sound a little hoarse. I'm getting over being sick. If you follow my blog, you might have already seen that I posted a top 10 list on my blog, I think about 2 weeks ago. But at the time, I couldn't narrow down an order, so I just kind of threw the list on there. Over the last 2 weeks, I've taken the time to really narrow it down to an actual order of my top 10s. But without further ado, let's just jump right in. And at number 10 is A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kemmerer. This is a YA fantasy Beauty and the Beast retelling that came out in, I think, January. It does put some fun spins on the trope because it kind of has this mesh of high fantasy and urban fantasy, and also because the main character has cerebral palsy, which I think this is the first time that I'd ever seen cerebral palsy rep in a fantasy book. I obviously can't speak to the representation, but I do know several own voice readers who were very pleased with the representation in it. I just thought it was a really fun read. There are just some really lovable characters in here, and there is a darkness to the Beast in this that I don't know if I've ever seen in a YA Beauty and the Beast retelling before. Instead of the prince just being trapped in the body of a beast in a way that we're familiar with, he actually basically blacks out and kills people. So it's kind of violent. Unfortunately, I do have one disclaimer to make about putting this on my top 10 list. It is the first book in a series. I tried to read the sequel, A Heart So Fierce and Broken, and friends, let me tell you, it was a terrible experience. I couldn't even finish it. I hated it so much. So part of me wants to say that I'm trying to treat A Curse So Dark and Lonely as a fantasy standalone with a vague open ending, which doesn't really work. The other part of me is having a hard time appreciating A Curse So Dark and Lonely as much as I did before trying to read the sequel. Is anybody else like that? Do you struggle with that, where if you don't like where a series heads, it makes it harder for you to enjoy your memories of the first book? Because that's a real issue for me. I deal with that a lot. Perfect example, The Conqueror Saga by Kirsten White. I hated Bright Wyvern so much. I refused to ever reread the first 2 books, even though I adored the first 2 books. Completely ruined them for me. I'm afraid that this may end up being a similar case. Anyways, this is supposed to be a positive video, so moving right along. At number 9 is In the Shadow of Spindrift House by Myra Grant. This is a Lovecraftian horror novella that came out this past year. It's about a group of teenagers, or they might be in their early 20s actually, who have spent their entire lives since they were preteens solving mysteries together. They're kind of like the Mystery Gang if you leave out Scooby-Doo and make the main character gay. They decide that they're going to solve one last mission, and so they go to Spindrift House. Essentially, 3 families hold claim to the deed of this house, and they want to finally settle who it rightfully belongs to once and for all. Without going into spoilery territory, we find out that the main character has a pretty special stake in it, but part of it is also just that she's trying to keep her friend group together. She's trying not to let go of these memories that they have, and she is helplessly in love with one of the other girls in the gang. So she's also trying to keep her close. There are scenes in this book that are so creepy. There are descriptions of creatures that genuinely gave me chills. And most of all, I was amazed by the atmosphere. I'm such a sucker for any kind of horror that involves like the ocean or like big bodies of water, or even just being like on the coast. And with this house literally being like on these cliffs overlooking the sea, it's, I swear, like you feel like you're there, and it's just absolutely incredible how atmospheric she made it. So if you like Lovecraftian horror, I really recommend it. If you're not familiar with Lovecraftian horror and you're looking for a horror story that is gonna give you a little bit of that chilling effect without giving you nightmares, I think this would be a really good place to start. Next at number 8 is going to be another horror pick, and that's The Girl in Red by Christina Henry. Christina Henry has become one of my absolute favorite authors. The Girl in Red is a dystopian horror retelling of Little Red Riding Hood. Red, our main character, is biracial, bisexual, and disabled. She's actually missing part of one of her legs. And she is one of the coolest characters I've ever read. Like, it's so easy to root for her. There is nothing weak or frightened about this girl. Even though the main premise of The Girl in Red is this sort of zombie apocalypse sort of setting, this book also goes to great lengths to tackle rape culture and sexism and the things that women go through. I also would recommend this for anyone who wants to get into horror but doesn't want something like super scary, because there is some violence in this and there are definitely some scary scenes, but it almost leans more dystopian than horror at times, and I think it would just be a really easy read for anybody to get into. And then at number 7 is God's Grave by Jay Kristoff. Given how much I love Nevernight, I honestly can't believe that it took me as long as it did to read God's Grave. We've already established that I'm terrible at continuing series that I like because I don't want them to end, which is why I still haven't read Dark Dawn. Anyways, I don't want to give any spoilers for the Nevernight Chronicles for anyone who hasn't read the first book yet. What I will say is that I genuinely adored the queer girl rep in this. Thought it was incredible. I love Jay's writing style. I love his sense of humor. I love the footnotes. I know that's a bit of an unpopular opinion, but I genuinely do. I think they're so much fun. They add so much to the story. As evidenced by my little plushie here, Mia is one of my absolute favorite main characters of all time. I think she's amazing. I could read about her forever. Everybody's talked about God's Grave. We probably don't need to dwell on it that much. And then at number 6 is Silver in the Wood by Emily Tesh. This is a fantasy novella about a man who lives in the woods, and he's basically the keeper of the woods. And one day a new steward has bought the property that the woods are on, and he wants Tobias, this forest guardian-esque man, to teach him a little bit about the woods. They become friends, they become more. It's so sweet. I don't hear enough people talk about this novella. It is so, so sweet. It has this amazing fae folklore behind it. This is incredibly atmospheric. So if you enjoy just super atmospheric woodland reads, obviously you need to read this. To be so short, it gives you the most well fleshed out story. I was actually kind of surprised to find out that we're getting a sequel this year, because this closed off really well in the end. That's not to say I'm not excited, because the sequel is one of my most anticipated releases of this year. I also have to tell you this because this is one of my favorite tropes in any kind of romantic plot line, and I know that a lot of people can relate to this. If you enjoy the kind of character pairings where one of them is like this big scary burly guy and then the other one's like this little bitty petite feisty thing, you will love the romance in this, because that's Tobias and Silver to a T, and it is amazing. Next is a book that I think has made the top 10 list of almost all of my friends for this past year, and that's Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. I'm not going to talk a lot about this because everyone else has already talked about it a lot, but I loved the romance in this so much. I thought it was really precious. The humor in this is actually one of my favorite parts. They are a really cute couple and it is really easy to ship them, but I also just really love the humor. I think Casey McQuiston is hilarious. I was amazed that this was only her debut novel, and I really can't wait for her next book. Okay, number 4 is Aurora Rising by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This is the first book in the Aurora Cycle series. This is another one I don't want to talk about too much because I think a lot of people already did that for me, but it is a YA sci-fi book, and I just thought it was really fun. It did remind me so much of the Illuminae Files in the sense that it was really funny, but then it would come out of nowhere with these like gut-wrenching moments that absolutely broke me, and I was like, what is this? I was laughing like 3 pages ago and now I'm just sobbing. I'm very excited for the second book. Can we just talk about the cover for the second book? Like, I love Cal so much, my sweet little angry space elf. I just love his character so much. I'm such a sucker for the grumpy warrior characters, and I just am really, really pleased with the cover for the second book, and I'm just very excited. Okay, and then at number 3 is The Dark Game by Jonathan Janz. This is a horror novel. Jonathan Janz is probably my favorite horror author, and this book absolutely blew me away. If you like horror and you like books about writers and the writing process, you will love this. It's about a writing retreat where 10 horror authors are invited to come stay at the home of the most like famous author ever. Everyone looks up to him, everyone's just so amazed by him, so everyone wants to learn from him. But when they get to this writing retreat, everything goes wrong. Like, all kinds of just weird stuff starts happening. The body count in this book is so high. The book has so many perspectives, but the thing is that people start dying so fast and the action comes at you so quickly that you don't even have time to be confused by the number of perspectives or anything, so it works really, really well. I think it was just a great writing choice. Super creepy. I always say this about Jonathan Jantz, but if you are a horror reader who's looking to kind of amp up and find something like scarier, I think he's a great author for that because his writing is really easy to get into. They're really well fleshed out, the characters are very well developed, and there is a lot of action, a lot of scary stuff going on, a lot of violence. So yeah, I highly recommend that. Okay, and number 2 was so hard to pick because I have 2 books left on the list, and both of them, like, if I could just skip number 2 and have 2 books tied for number 1, that's honestly what I would have done because it was so difficult to pick. But a number 2 is Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is a rom-com that came out a few months ago, and this is genuinely one of the most adorable, precious, funniest, swooniest romance books I've ever read. Chloe Brown is chronically ill. She has fibromyalgia, and she comes from this kind of wealthy family, and she tends to live inside of a bubble, but she has a near-death experience and it inspires her to want to get out and live life. So she moves out and she makes this bucket list of things that she wants to do. The problem is that with some of it she can't do it alone, so she needs to find somebody to help her. Well, the apartments that she's just moved into, there's this handyman named Red. They don't get along at first. They have a lot of misconceptions about each other, but at the same time they're also super attracted to each other. And so Chloe ends up asking Red to help her with her list. Shenanigans ensue. It's adorable, it's hilarious, it has amazing representation. Get a Life, Chloe Brown is the first romance that I've ever read with a chronically ill main character, and that was something that means a lot to me because I personally am someone who deals with chronic illness and chronic pain. And not only was it great to be able to relate to Chloe in that way, but there are scenes between Chloe and Red in this book that just kind of put the whole world and my own relationship with my spouse in a new light, because it kind of reminded me that just because you have chronic illness or chronic pain or because you're disabled or anything like that doesn't mean that you are a burden or that you're less worthy of love. And that's something that I have to remind myself of sometimes. And there were scenes in this book that moved me to tears because I was just so seen and so understood, and I felt like Talia just handled it with so much care and thoughtfulness. It is Own Voices rep. It's also Own Voices for the fact that Chloe is black. She's also plus size, and then Red has like PTSD from a previous like toxic relationship, so there's also that thrown in. So it's very diverse, and honestly I love this book so much that I would say if I had to pick just one book to recommend to someone who is brand new to romance and looking for their first romance read, I would pick Get a Life, Chloe Brown. I think it would be the perfect introduction to the genre. Okay, and this was tough, but finally at number 1, my favorite read of 2019. Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. Honestly, if we have discussed this book, you're probably not surprised because this book meant so much to me. I mean, the fact that it features a sword-wielding librarian as the heroine, like, that alone was enough to do it. But there's also just, it's funny, it's sweet, it's dark at times, it's very suspenseful, there's a lot of action going on. There's a demon butler who turns into a cat. I feel like that should probably be enough to convince you to read it. It has one of my favorite love interests of all time. Nathaniel is the most precious little being, and he's a queer guy as a love interest, which we don't get often, but honey, we stan. Seriously though, Sorcery of Thorns takes everything that I love about stories and combines all of these different qualities into one book, and it's flawless. I'm amazed. I want so badly for us to get a sequel. I don't know if it'll happen. I haven't heard anything about it, but Simon & Schuster, if for whatever bizarre reason you happen to see this video, please, the people are begging you. We need more books about Elizabeth and Nathaniel and Silas because I just need more time with them. Okay, and that's it. Thank you so much if you stuck around through me rambling and gushing incessantly about my 10 favorite books of 2019. I had a really fun time with this, and I hope that you did too. If you did, please click like and subscribe. It means so much to me, and I hope to see you in another video again soon. Bye!